When you're doing a live stream, there are a lot of things that can go wrong.
And we had pizza for dinner.
Yeah.
And then we had, I'll be right back.
Oh! Are you okay?
Over the past 4 years, I've gotten injured, gotten sick, and had power outages during live streams. Basically, everything that could go wrong has gone wrong. And when it comes to live streaming, there are things like that are totally out of your control. But fortunately, most things when it comes to live streaming are within your control. So today I wanted to help you learn from my mistakes, and trust me, I've made a lot of them, to help you level up your live streams. So by far, the most common mistake that I see in people's live streams is them ignoring the audio. Audio should be your #1 technical priority of a live stream. Forget cameras, forget everything else. Focus on your audio. When it comes to video, I've often said that audio is half of video, but honestly, I think it might even be more than half, and people will watch a bad looking video that sounds good a lot longer than they'll watch a good looking video that sounds bad. Fortunately, you don't need a ton of expensive gear to get good audio. You don't need the Rodecaster Pro, you don't need a $400 microphone, you don't need any of that. If you can just invest like $50, especially even upwards of $100 in a decent microphone, you're gonna be set. And if you just buy a USB microphone that gets good reviews, it's probably gonna do pretty well for your streams. This is the Samson Q2u, a super popular USB microphone. It's got USB and it also has an XLR input, so you could use it if you got an interface or a mixer down the line. It costs about $60, $70, prices change all the time. It comes with the little stand, it comes with the holder, and the sound quality of the Q2u is not bad at all. So that's my cue to you to consider investing in something like this if you haven't done so already. Now, of course, once you get your microphone, no matter what kind of microphone it is, it's not gonna do you much good if you don't know how to use it. So be sure to spend some time and figure out what kind of pickup pattern, what kind of features, what kind of switches, knobs, and dials your specific microphone might have. So that means you're gonna need to spend some time sitting down, doing some test recordings, listening back to things, trying them out. For example, if you're somebody who's going to be standing and walking around and moving a lot during your live stream, maybe a fixed position microphone is a terrible choice. Maybe you're gonna want a lavalier microphone that you can pin to you, and then when you go all the way on the other side of the room, it's not gonna matter, it's still gonna sound pretty good. Maybe you're somebody who types a lot, hits the table a lot when you talk, and that means having a little stand like this might be a bad idea because it's going to pick up all the sounds. So maybe you're gonna need to find a way to position your mic on a boom arm or rig it up where it's not gonna be affected by those sounds. And I talked about audio first on purpose because it is the #1 mistake people make. But speaking of purpose, now that we've said adios to bad audio, let's talk about mistake #2, and that is not having a purpose for your live stream. The #1 fear that people have when they start out streaming is, oh my gosh, what if nobody shows up to my stream? And that's probably gonna happen. I've streamed to nobody before other than like myself on another device. You're still gonna get a lot of practice and a lot of experience from doing the stream, and that's gonna carry on into future streams and future videos. Plus, there's always replay value, so someone could find the stream later on and watch the replay, but that's only going to have value if your stream has purpose in the first place. And purpose doesn't mean you need a full-on keynote lecture that you're giving and it's like a university class. It just means make sure there's a reason that you're doing the stream and a reason for people to join. And I would definitely advise against doing just a general Q&A stream, especially when you're just starting out. As you've grown your community and your audience gets a little bigger, Q&A streams become a little easier because there's more people there. But until you get to that point, it's a good idea to have some kind of outline for what you want to cover in your stream. And even if you do get to the point where you can just turn on a live stream and people are going to join and you can chat with them, it's still a good idea to kind of focus on a specific theme or direct the conversation a little bit so it's not totally all over the place. And I've even watched streams from people while they're just doing what they do. They're just working on stuff like recording music or programming code or editing a video, like whatever they're doing, they're just sort of streaming that. Even something like that that feels relatively unstructured still has a purpose. You're still watching somebody do what they do, you're seeing their workflow, that's exciting, and then you can ask them questions and they can jump in and have fun chatting along the way. So when it comes to streaming, much like sea life in the ocean, you gotta have a porpoise. Now, was that joke not delightful? Well, speaking of things that are delightful, mistake number 3 has to do with camera angles and lighting. And it absolutely doesn't matter what camera you're using, what lens you're using, there are a few really important things to keep in mind about your angles and your lighting during your stream, and your videos too. And the first thing just has to do with having a nicely framed shot where everything makes sense and you don't have too much empty dead space up here, or your angle is too high, it can make your subject look really small and really meek. Now, sometimes for streaming, having that fishbowl view can actually be super cool. Like I've got a GoPro in the corner of my office studio right here, and that can be kind of a cool thing to give the viewer some context of the space that you're in since they can't physically be there with you, but that's probably not gonna be your main shot. If I keep the camera more or less at eye level, or maybe sometimes even a little above eye level, that's gonna be the most neutral shot for your stream. And sometimes people can feel sort of uncomfortable looking away from the camera to focus on things over here. So I'm here right now to tell you that in today's world, viewers are very used to seeing somebody look off screen to do something or check in with the chat or whatever, but the camera should really be your main focus unless the stream is to watch you do something. Like if I'm using a power tool or playing a game, it makes sense that I'm gonna be focused over here. I'm not gonna be using a jigsaw and like staring at the camera and cutting off my fingers, even though that would probably get a lot of views. So the simplest thing that I recommend doing is, if possible, keeping your camera right next to your computer's display. Not above it, which is really common, but right next to it, so that way all you have to do is just look slightly over and boom, there's the camera. And then just train yourself, which you can do, it becomes muscle memory after a while, to just look at the camera as a person and treat it as though it's somebody else that's in the room with you and you're talking to them while you're streaming. And camera angles and lighting are tied together really well because people love to focus on their camera. But if you notice, audio came first and now we're talking about lighting. We haven't even talked about cameras yet, and we're honestly not going to, because lighting is the other thing that doesn't even matter if you're using a webcam or a $4,000 camera. Good lighting can help any camera to look pretty darn decent and pretty darn usable. Now, not long ago, I did make an entire video all about my lighting setup, which is pretty extreme and in general for your streams. Which, speaking of, I used to do a weekly stream and then I stopped doing it and it became my X stream. And when you're streaming, you're basically gonna wanna follow the same rules for lighting as you would for a pre-recorded video. However, to put together a full-on lighted studio with high-end lights can be incredibly expensive, and you don't need to feel intimidated about that. You can start on a budget. You can go to a site like Amazon and just look for inexpensive video lights that get good reviews, and they're probably gonna be fine, especially if you're not moving them around a lot. Cheaper lights tend to break down when they're moved and taken and broken down and set up over and over again. They break pretty quickly, but if you just put it on a stand off to the side and it's just in the same spot all the time, they can last for a pretty long while. I do recommend, whenever possible, using dedicated video lights so that there's no flickering whatsoever in your video, and to start out by focusing on you because you are the subject. So light yourself first and then focus on all the ambient environmental stuff. Because if your space looks really cool, but you're just this dark figure that's sort of sitting in there, it's not gonna look that great. And if you do wanna use RGB lights to add splashes of color to your space, I think that's a super cool, fun thing to do. Just be careful with very cheap LED RGB lights because they do tend to flicker a lot on video. So just like audio, where it was get your gear and test it and figure it out, same thing with lighting. Get your lights, set them up, test them out, use them with your camera, see if there's any weird reflections or flickering. And now that you've been enlightened on lighting, let's chat about mistake number 4, which is the chat. Now, in my opinion, when it comes to streaming, the chat is where it's at, but how you interact with your chat and your community totally depends on the topic of your stream and your personality. You're doing a live stream, which means you are inviting in opportunities for problems and mistakes, but you're also inviting in the opportunity to connect with people in real time in a really fun and unique way. So while there are so many different ways to approach how you engage with the chat, here are a few simple ground rules. And the first thing is, be sure not to ignore the chat. Those people are there supporting you. They're excited to interact with you. Don't totally ignore that. You might want to engage with every comment depending on your audience. You might want to find a way to pop comments on screen using something like Ecamm Live or Aaron Parecki's Chrome extension. And be sure when you are talking to people in the chat that you're using their screen names That's something I had to learn early on, was I would just start reading comments and you would have no idea what the heck was happening. So be sure to say like, oh, Skater Boy 2002 says that this chat is fire lit. And that way they're gonna feel like, oh, they said my name, it's really important. But now that you're gonna be sure not to ignore your chat, be sure not to let the chat totally derail you. And by that, I mean, I have seen so many people who, as soon as a comment pops up, they pull it into the chat and they acknowledge it right away, which feels really polite. And I definitely did that in the beginning, but it can be really distracting for other viewers who aren't necessarily trying to chat with you. If you're in the middle of a thought and you're saying something like, after all these years, the biggest piece of advice I can say is, oh, Skaterboy 2002 says, did you see that Netflix original series last night? The ending was fire lit. And then you start talking about that comment and you forget the main point, or you have to go double back and like, what were we talking about? Yeah, it was something, blah. It's really frustrating for other viewers when that's their chat experience and it feels constantly interrupted. And this also kind of ties in with the idea of having a purpose for your stream. Sometimes you might decide like, hey everybody, today we're gonna talk about the Stream Deck and all these cool ways that you can use the Stream Deck, but then everyone in your chat is like, hey, what camera are you using? Can we talk about cameras? If you had this idea, but it seems like everyone who's actually there wants to talk about something else, it's totally okay to switch gears and focus on what the viewers want to see if that's something you're comfortable with doing. But if you don't want to do that, you're also in charge and you can say, you know what, next time we'll talk about cameras, but today I really want to focus on this because there's some super cool stuff that I want to show you. So after all that chit chat, let's go into mistake number 5, and that is the stream that should have been a pre-recorded video. You might have a job or have had a job where you've gone to a meeting and it turns out that meeting could have been an email. There's a very similar thing that happens with live streams where people will do an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours or more of live streaming, and it turns out maybe that should have just been a pre-recorded video. Like if I said, hey, going back to the Stream Deck, in today's stream, I'm gonna show you how to add a custom icon to the Stream Deck, and then I spend 3 minutes dragging an icon there and it's done. And then people are gonna come in after 40 minutes and go like, hey, how do I do the thing with the icon? And I'm gonna just keep repeating myself over and over, and it's gonna get kind of disjointed and kind of weird. So it's a good idea to pick your streaming topic as something that could potentially lend itself to an ongoing discussion for, you know, an hour or two or whatever length of stream you're comfortable with. Because I don't know if this has happened to you, but it's definitely happened to me where I've searched something up like how to do blank, and then I find a video that's the perfect answer, but instead of just being a 3 to 4 minute video, it's an hour and 45 minute long live stream with no chapter markers added in afterwards, and you just have to scrub through to like the 3 minutes that actually apply to the topic. Now sometimes you might want to make your stream work in conjunction with your video. That's like a super smart thing to do. So if you did a video about like, hey, here's a couple Stream Deck quick tip, extreme quick tip decks on deck, and that was a 4-minute video or whatever, but then you do a stream where you talk about like, let's dive into a bunch of stuff to do with the Stream Deck. And so constantly throughout the stream, as you're talking to your audience and you're engaging with your community, you're just diving into more depth about whatever your video topic was. Now notice that none of these 5 mistakes had anything to do with specific cameras or camera equipment. I know that's one of the #1 things that people want to focus on when they start streaming. I love camera equipment. I'm definitely not someone who believes that gear doesn't matter. Gear definitely does matter. But when it comes to streaming, these 5 things are much more common mistakes that I feel have a much more negative impact on people's streams rather than using like a low-end webcam. It's really just important to take your time, learn your gear, learn your software that you're using, experiment a bit, and then just jump in. And I know it's the internet, but in general, people are very forgiving when they see you as a one-person production crew and like, oh, your mic gets muted for a second, or you switch to the wrong screen, or the camera quality is not perfect. This is by no means a complete list of every streaming mistake, and it is heavily biased in my own opinion, but in my experience, both as a streamer and as a viewer, these are the 5 most common mistakes that I see people make. So as always, thank you to everyone who supports my channel. It means the world to me, and I wouldn't be able to do what I do without your support, so thank you very much. And if you want to avoid making more streaming mistakes, then don't make the mistake of not checking out my live streaming tips and tricks playlist.